So hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Unpacking Possibility. I'm your host, Traci Stein, as always. I'm so happy to be here with you today. Today's episode is about building healthy self-esteem, and specifically 6 components of healthy self-esteem, and one very simple but powerful and easy to use tool that you can use to strengthen yours. Now, I've seen, I don't know how many people over the years, and I have to tell you, self-esteem is one of those things that a lot of people struggle with. A lot of times you would not know it. You will meet them and think that they are confident and happy and don't have a shred of self-doubt. And sometimes these people will be people that you know who are, to all outward appearances, successful. They have great families, or so it seems. They are attractive maybe, or smart, or they just seem to handle things well. But inside there might be an ongoing struggle with how to feel good about themselves. So today I wanted to spend a little bit of time on that. And by the end of this episode, again, you'll have a clearer sense of some things you can shift to help your self-esteem get better and better, I hope. I know it will, because I know it's possible, because I've seen it happen time and time again. And again, that one simple technique you'll be able to use right away. Now, as some of you know, in addition to being a psychologist, I'm certified in clinical hypnosis. And the reason I'm telling you this again, if you're new to the podcast, is because for years I've created self-hypnosis audio programs, meditations, guided imagery, affirmations to help people feel better, because our minds are actually designed to be flexible in that way. We have these kind of old scripts that all of us kind of find driving our lives, sometimes in a direction we don't want to go in. And these tools can help us reframe how we think about ourselves and what's possible. And as a result, we can feel better, but we can also do better, make different choices, and create a life that's more in line with what we really want for us. Now, my first ever album actually was called Healthy Self-Esteem, and it was guided hypnotic imagery to help people address self-esteem issues and start shifting, again, that inner script. The reason I'm mentioning this is it was about 2012, I think, when this was released. And I've done a number of albums since then. It is still the most popular album I have created. And what that tells me is that people still struggle with self-esteem. They're looking for ways to undo some of the negative thinking they have about themselves. And I think it's helpful. I know it's helpful. And I've had literally thousands and thousands of people listen to these tracks. And I've had a lot of people reach out and say it was the first time they were able to start to change their self-talk. Now, I want to go over 6 components of healthy self-esteem. I took some notes because I want to make sure that I can kind of organize my thoughts well. But basically, many things, by the way, can negatively impact our self-esteem. So all of us have these. You are not alone if any of this resonates with you. In fact, just about everybody has had things that can chip away at their sense of self. So these are things like failures. And they might be things that you think are a catastrophic failure. Other people may or may not. They may be failures that feel very public. They may feel very private. They may be when you were very young and somebody really criticized what you were doing and it felt catastrophic. And now you would look back and objectively say, it's really not that big a deal, but it shaped the script. It shaped your life script. It shaped the movie that plays again and again in your mind about who you are and what you can do and what you're worth and so forth. It includes misfortunes. So these are things that have nothing to do with you in terms of anything you did, but maybe something happened that changed how able your family was to take care of you. Or that affected your employment or affected a relationship in some way, but things that were outside of your control. That's what I would consider a misfortune. Something that is not great, unfortunate, maybe objectively awful, that happened to you, that made you doubt who you are or what you're capable of. Another thing that can negatively impact self-esteem is the mistakes that we've made, and everybody makes them. There is no one on earth, truly, who hasn't made mistakes. Now, all mistakes aren't equal, and some people have had more than their fair share, but mistakes are also how we learn. And notice that I just reframed that, right? Because we can think of mistakes as these things that are like permanent blotches on the record of our lives. Most mistakes honestly aren't going to be like that. Another thing that negatively impacts self-esteem is harsh criticism from other people. And we wind up internalizing that criticism. So, not everything is an early childhood family generated thing, but many things are. It's just the way things are. But if you grew up in a household where you really couldn't get anything right, or where only incredible and heroic achievements got any notice, you're going to be pretty perfectionistic, or you're going to be hopeless about what you can do, or both. But it's not going to set you up to feel good about yourself. Another way to think of self-esteem, by the way, is how we would describe ourselves, the adjectives we would use to describe how we feel about ourselves or how we imagine other people would evaluate us, right? So everything from skillful to not skillful, or kind-hearted to mean-spirited, to competent versus not competent. Things like that. Attractive versus not, athletic versus not, smart versus not, whatever it is. We are rarely able to be super objective about ourselves. Again, it's human nature. Often we do internalize early criticism, and it will be given greater weight than later criticism. But the problem is it sets us up to, have an uncanny ability to either find people who will be similarly critical, or to discount positive feedback we get and be laser focused on and amplify negative feedback or negative, events in our lives or things we don't like about ourselves. I'm going to give you a funny example. Wasn't funny at the time, but I remember having to give a talk as part of my PhD program. It was one of the many kind of hurdles I had to give over. And it was a talk in front of all of the psychology PhD students and faculty. And I prepared really well. I got a ton of feedback. It was a well done talk. People enjoyed it. They learned something. And objectively, I know that I put a lot into it. I cared about it. I wanted to do a good job. I think we got these written evaluations from every single person who attended. So, which was dozens of people. I'm going to make you laugh because it's going to seem so silly now to be laser focused on it, but 2 people gave me feedback that was almost identical. I imagine that they were sitting next to each other. Maybe they were friends, who knows? But the only real written feedback I got from them was not about content, was not about anything that I got right or wrong. It was, she tends to talk with her hands too much and it's annoying and distracting. And you know what? It probably was annoying to them. Not a soul other than those 2. And I don't know who wrote that, and it doesn't matter at all. I do talk a lot with my hands, and you can see that. And it's something that would be pretty hard to unlearn now. So if it's annoying to you, I apologize. So the point is, at the time, I might have gotten, 60 positive to super positive comments, but the 2 comments about my annoying hand movements, we're like, oh no, I got to work on that. So that's kind of what I mean, though, by we can be laser focused on something negative and discount the positive. And just as the days go forward, notice how you may tend to do that in your own life. Okay. But again, when our self-esteem is lower or when we're sensitive to something in particular, we tend to artificially highlight and inflate negative things. We minimize or ignore the positive. So pay attention to your tendency to do that. I want to let you know that an antidote to that, by the way, is something called self-acceptance. We'll get to that in a bit. It's one of our components. But self-acceptance, I want you to imagine this. This is hypnotic as I do this because hopefully you'll form an image in your mind. I want you to think of self-acceptance as like a key that unlocks the door to the prison of self-criticism and the prison of low self-esteem and the prison even of social anxiety, right? The prison of unhappiness because we feel like we can't get it right. Self-acceptance. And we'll get more details on that in a minute. So again, in this album, Healthy Self-Esteem, and you don't have to use mine, I'm using it as an example because I was very specific at talking about these things in the introduction. But one idea, one component of self-esteem that I went over was something called having an internal locus of control. Now, that's a psychology construct that got a lot more airtime back in the day than it does now. But it basically means that you believe and know that you have the power to shape your life, regardless of those things that you may not be able to change. Think about it. We have all been in situations, some of them long and ongoing, where we did not feel like we had a lot of power. And that may in fact have been true, whether it's due to childhood or trauma or some other adverse circumstance. But almost always there is something, even if it is a very small thing, that we have some control over, that we have an ability to make a choice about. So internal locus of control is believing you're the one driving the proverbial ship, right? You get to steer it. You can't get rid of all the icebergs. You cannot control storms that are going on around you. Sometimes the visibility may be poor or your instrumentation might not seem like it's as helpful, right? But you are able to navigate the day-to-day of your life with some degree of certainty that you are an active and competent participant with some agency. So one way to kind of recenter and have a more of a feeling of an internal locus of control can be to be aware of your own self-talk, that inner critic, and notice some of the kind of habitual things you might tell yourself that are generally pessimistic about what you can do and what you can't. And notice, ask yourself what the evidence for that is. Ask yourself what it would look like if, in fact, the truth was that you are doing actually better or capable of more than you've given yourself credit for. Sometimes that is all it will take for the first step. We can also choose simple things in our daily lives for the most part. What we're going to do in terms of a healthy choice we're going to make for ourselves. And we're not going to be perfect at that. Or how we're going to respond to a difficult situation. Or where we're going to focus our attention. So don't necessarily think that the choices you make and the power you feel in a situation has to be something that is expressed in this enormous way. It can be small but significant. All right, number two, second component of healthy self-esteem would be self-acceptance. And I mentioned that a few moments ago. This really is pretty simple and straightforward. It's accepting yourself as you are in the present moment, even if there are things you want to change. Now, why am I mentioning that? A lot of times people think that self-acceptance, I accept myself as I am, means only if or only when some boxes are checked off. So only when I succeed at this job or get this promotion or make this amount of money will I accept myself. Only when I get in shape will I accept myself as I am, recognizing my inherent worth, right? Only when I'm in a relationship, or only when I'm in a new relationship, or only when I accomplish XYZ. And the thing is, we're always working towards something. But the worth, the self-worth, again, it's fundamental to us. We're born with it. It's inherent. Our self-worth is something that can be thought of as a stable quality, even when we feel like it isn't, right? It's not conditional. And accepting yourself as you are in the now, even if there are things you want to change, means that if you're 50 pounds overweight and you know you want to start a new healthy lifestyle, it's being proud of yourself in the now for making the decision to do something different that you want to do, not that somebody else is telling you to do. If you want to achieve a professional or educational goal, it's accepting that you're not there in the moment and loving yourself in the now. And I know that can be hard at first. It's also not conditional on someone else recognizing our worth. And I think that's so important to point out because in a way, we're kind of socialized to feel like, especially now in the social media age, we're kind of socialized to feel like the number of likes from complete strangers or shares on a post or people who say something nice in a public forum or the approval we get from whether it's a friend or a family member or stranger, that's what determines whether we can accept ourselves in the now. And that's really not what self-acceptance is about. It's a practice. I want you to think of all of these things as a practice, right? But again, you are born with worth. You are worthy right now. And what a wonderful thing that is to remember. And even if it's hard to feel it right now, I want you to allow, if it feels good to hear it from me, I am saying you are worthy right now. And I hope you allow yourself to at least receive that because I mean it. And I don't have to actually know you to know that that's true. The other thing I want to say about that is not letting our worth be conditional on what other people think. It's kind of funny, right? Because it's like when you hear about it logically, it's like, well, okay, of course, right? But it can be hard in the moment. There is not a supermodel on earth that everyone thinks is beautiful. You can't name one that every person on earth would agree is the most beautiful. There is not a successful person whose work would be equally valued by everyone, or that everyone would even agree is successful. There is not a smart person that everyone would agree is smart or equally smart. There's not a philanthropist on earth that everyone would agree with the causes they support. And I'm saying this because the idea isn't to please everyone. And I don't actually know how many people we really do have to please. We have to live in accordance with our values and we have to know what they are. And in doing that, I think that fosters regard from other people. But I wouldn't let other people's ideas of what we have to be drive how we feel we are. I know it's easier said than done. You don't need to hold yourself, though, to an impossible standard to be wonderful. Truly. All right. So number three component of healthy self-esteem would be self-efficacy. And that's kind of related to the other things we've been talking about. And it's really seeing yourself as competent and able to do the things you need and want to do. That absolutely contributes contributes to how we feel about ourselves. Remember that again, you don't have to be exactly at the end of the road, or you don't have to be at the top of the mountain yet. It's a journey, right? So that can mean just believing that you can take the first step. Number 4, self-forgiveness. This is important, and it's more important than you think it is, because some people think that they just have to aspire to forgive other people, but we can be so hard on ourselves. Now, there are people, true, who really are not terribly self-reflective and don't take responsibility for anything. It's never them, right? Everybody knows people like that. That's not what I'm talking about. There can be a myth that self-forgiveness means letting yourself get away with stuff or not holding yourself accountable. No, we need to do that. But there are certain people who are so guilt-prone or so shame-prone that they cannot move forward. It's like being in quicksand, right? And not realizing there's a lifeline out of that sinking hole, right? Because that's what it feels like when we can't forgive ourselves. It feels like we're drowning in hopelessness. And again, self-forgiveness is another type of key to unlock that prison. Let yourself out of that prison of feeling bad about yourself. Because you really can't forgive other people truly if you cannot forgive yourself. It is so amazing how once we're kind to ourselves, how that just opens up our ability to be compassionate and kind to others. Actually, there's research that shows that. But for self-forgiveness, again, some of the people who have the hardest time with this, just so you know, I don't know if this has been your experience, it's certainly been mine. Some of the kindest, nicest, most generous, most thoughtful, careful people are the most guilt-ridden people I know, and the most guilt-ridden people I've seen in my practice. And what happens is the laser beam of their awareness, again, focuses on anything they did that they wish they had done differently, or that they feel like they did completely wrong, or on the stuff that they think they should have done and they didn't. And sometimes it's really, there's not anything they could have done differently. And I see this happening and being even more amplified when somebody's grieving. And if you've ever had to take care of anybody, if you've ever been a sole caregiver for someone, and despite your best efforts and the best care that they could get, they did not make it. They didn't survive whatever was going on with them. These are the most guilt-ridden people around, and we can spend all of this time going over and over and over every possible thing we didn't do perfectly, or that we imagine we didn't do perfectly. What that does, though, it's an illusion that really it traps us. And it keeps us anchored in a past that we cannot, for all intents and purposes, that we cannot affect. We can't change. And it takes us out of the now, which is the only time when we can actually really do something, right? And it prevents us from planning for a more positive future. It's okay to have regret. It's okay to feel bad about things, but not unless we can learn from them, right? That's really their sole value, is to understand something better and then do something differently going forward, right? And I've said before in some of my affirmations, perfection is an illusion that gets in the way of learning. That is so true. It really is. I mean, if you hold yourself to an unattainable standard, how could you ever be happy or feel good? And it would make you discount all of the positive things you have done, are doing, and could do. So let's get rid of that. We don't need that anymore. As you probably know, self-forgiveness is among the most liberating feelings in the world. And if you haven't experienced it, please afford yourself the kindness and grace to give it a try. And again, it really does create space to help you be more forgiving of others. That doesn't mean giving yourself or someone else a pass for something that was, really egregious, but it helps you move forward. Okay. So self-compassion. Self-compassion is related to everything that I just went over. I'm sure you've heard about this term most likely because in the past several years, there's been a lot of research into self-compassion. There's been a lot of talk about self-compassion. It's one of these things that I think people who are unfamiliar with it really often don't understand well. And so they don't realize that something that sounds so simple or so soft can be so powerful. So mindfulness is one of the three kind of elements, the major elements of self-compassion. A lot of you know what that is, but I'll go over it quickly. It's the ability to be in the present moment in a way that is non-judgmental. It is the ability to notice our thoughts and feelings and our associations, our memories, all of that about whatever's happening without confusing that with whatever is going on for us, right? Because our thoughts and feelings about anything are actually separate from that thing, right? So if you're having thoughts and feelings that something feels painful right now, whether it's, let's just say it's you've lost someone recently, or let's just say you're going through a difficult time, right? A huge change in your life, and maybe it feels anxiety provoking, or maybe it feels grief inducing, or maybe it just feels like something you don't want. And I'm sure you can think of a million different difficult situations. But the situation is the situation, and it is actually separate from the thoughts and feelings and the intensity of those thoughts and feelings that we have about it. And that's kind of something that, again, can also reduce our suffering once we realize that, right? Because time's going to keep marching forward no matter what. Everything in our life changes. Bad things, good things, neutral things. Our life shifts. So recognizing that a lot of what we struggle with is temporary can be very liberating. And mindfulness enables us to be anchored on the present in, again, a more non-judgmental and authentic way. The second component of self-compassion that I want to cover is common humanity. And really what that means is that just like you, I am, and everyone else is human. We are fallible. We make mistakes. That's part of life. And again, we can give ourselves grace about that, right? And once we realize that we don't have to be any more perfect than anyone else, it's not possible and it's not useful, right? We might think that it is, and our egos can get so attached to feeling like, well, that works for everybody else, but not for me. Recognizing our common humanity is extremely liberating. It helps us to stop beating ourselves up and placing unrealistic demands on ourselves. Okay. And the third component of self-compassion that I'll talk about is self-kindness. That's really just what it sounds like. Self-kindness. Think about how you would express kindness to someone else, someone you know or someone you didn't. The tenderness and the care and the thoughtfulness that you would have for another being. Whether it's, the proverbial example of seeing an elderly person crossing the street and needing assistance, and you do it because you care, not because anybody sees you doing it and is going to think you're a nice person, but because inside of you, it's something you want to do because it activates your own kindness. Or to notice a child learning to walk, and maybe the child falls and starts crying, and your compassion for their frustration, your compassion for their tears motivates you to do something kind, to sit patiently, to help them up. That kind of kindness is what you would want to apply to yourself. And again, we can be taught to think that any of that is self-indulgence. It's not. Think of it as an investment not only in your own well-being and emotional well-being, but your ability to be kind to others. We're all kind of one in that way. We think of ourselves as separate, but we're not nearly as separate as we think. And being kind and self-compassionate to us, actually, the research shows that it enhances our ability to be compassionate to others. What a great thing that is. And if you need another example, maybe you do, maybe you don't, but I'm going to use it anyway. It's a commonly used metaphor. I've used it in a lot of my meditations, and with good reason. And I do this too because there's a conversational hypnotic element to this, right? Because as you form a movie in your mind about these examples, it can make the concepts sink in a little bit more deeper and more transformative way. A little bit deeper and more transformative way. If you were planting something in your garden or in a flower pot or however you want to think about it, and this very tender seedling started to emerge from warm earth, right? Striving to reach toward the sun and to grow and to thrive. You're caring about that seedling and wanting it to flourish. Would it lead you to dump vinegar on the roots? It probably wouldn't, because we know that would harm the plant. What you would do is your compassion and caring about that plant. What would you do? You would make sure it had plenty of sun and just the right amount, and you would water it. And maybe you would apply some sort of plant food or fertilizer. You would nurture it, right? And I want you to think of yourself and your own development as that tender seedling. You can be that gentle gardener for yourself. Self-kindness. So number six component of healthy self-esteem is a sense of meaning and purpose. Now, all of us come into life, I think, with a purpose. Sometimes it takes us a while to discover what that is. It does not have to be some grand, gigantic thing. It can be being a good person in your community. It can be, again, being a good parent, a good sibling, a good teacher or student. It could be a good friend. It could be being just a creative person and bringing the beautiful things you create into the world, and they bring other people joy. It could be lovingly preparing meals for your family or other people you love. It does not have to be this huge thing. And by the way, it does not have to be what your occupation is. A lot of people feel most motivated and called to something outside of their jobs. If it is your job, terrific. But it's trusting that you're here for a purpose, and whether or not you're super aware or clear of what you think that is right now, honestly, doesn't matter. You have one. But when we do things that are in line with our values, that creates a sense of meaning and purpose. And if you're not sure exactly how you would define your values, that's okay. You might want to say, well, what do I admire in other people? Right. And I don't just mean, again, in the social media kind of way, somebody who's got, 5 million followers or whatever, but I mean, what would you want in a close friend? A friendship where you would feel safe and well supported, where you would feel seen and accepted and loved for who you are. Even if somebody took issue with some things, that's not what I mean. But what qualities do you cherish in other people? Because chances are those are qualities you also value in yourself. And once you know what those qualities are, they kind of lead you along the path with purpose, right? And again, it doesn't have to be something that lands you, on, the world stage. Maybe it will. I don't know. But a sense of purpose can get us through difficult times and lend greater satisfaction and joy to our daily lives. And they certainly help with our self-esteem because, again, we're here for a reason. All of the little things kind of don't matter as much, right? All the day-to-day frustrations or missteps or annoyances or whatever, they're so distantly secondary to our purpose. And then affirmations, I want to talk about in terms of a tool now to help strengthen self-esteem. Now, there is research support for using affirmations, and they seem so simple. They're just present tense, positively themed statements so they can help you change the way you feel about yourself. They can help enhance your self-optimism. They can help you make important changes over time because they help change that script, the movie in your mind that tells you who you are and what you can do and, how you should feel about yourself. And a lot of times the movie we've been playing has not been a helpful one. It hasn't even really been an accurate script to live our lives by. So affirmations are one type of tool that can help shift that. Now, not everybody loves them. Some people really love them. Some are kind of neutral and some are like, it's not for me. See what works for you. But I mentioned my first album, Healthy Self-Esteem, before, and I have to tell you, you can listen to the affirmations from the album completely for free. There are no strings attached at all. They are available on the Insight Timer app. There is a free version of the app, and the track has been on there for several years now for free. You could listen to them 1,000,000 times. You would not be charged. There are other people who I'm sure have albums out on self-esteem, healthy self-esteem. Listen to what works for you. But if you wanted to try mine after I read some of them to you, please feel free. Literally, that I think is the most popular track I've ever released. And I think I have like 15 or 16 albums out now with multiple tracks per album. And I still get people who reach out to tell me that it's been transformative. It's more powerful than you would think just reading simple statements would be. See if it works for you. The entire album is on Hay House. It's on their Hay House Empower You Unlimited audio app. And that you can also just purchase the full album at Hay House if you want. But again, if it works for you, great. If not, feel free to listen to these affirmations for free. I think they're really powerful. So I'm going to read a few affirmations from that track, from that album. Keep in mind that affirmations tend to be more helpful over time. And you'll know when it's time to go on and listen to something else. As I read this sampling of the affirmations, what I suggest you do is you can repeat them out loud to yourself, or you can repeat them silently. It doesn't matter. I'm going to leave a little space between each one. And again, this is just a small sampling. But as you do it, allow yourself to set aside some of the inner critic's chatter that can often be playing in all of our minds, and allow yourself the possibility of taking these in as true, because truly I mean them. You are worthy. You do matter. And I do believe in you. So I'm going to read the affirmations and then I'll sign off for the day. All right. I know that I am here for a purpose. My life has meaning. Each day, I understand myself a bit more. I do what I need to do easily and well. Each day, I feel more and more confident. I am grateful for whatever my body has been able to do. In every moment, I am shaping my life for the better. I have survived everything that has ever happened to me. I am a survivor. Each day is a new beginning. Thanks so much for joining me on this episode of Unpacking Possibility. And until next time, as always, be well.